Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. North Korea recently marked the Day of the Sun, the birthday of its founding leader Kim Il-sung, with large-scale celebrations and praise for both past and present leadership. But pundits say that Kim Jong-un didn't make his usual public visit to the family mausoleum, possibly signaling continued efforts to emphasize his own authority over dynastic tradition. At the same time, the regime is amplifying propaganda that highlights Kim's ideological leadership and policy achievements, positioning him as a central figure shaping North Korea's future. Amid this, Seoul and Washington, the allies signed a new combined war plan, the first major update in nearly a decade, aimed at countering North Korea's advancing nuclear and missile capabilities. To delve deeper into the situation on the Korean peninsula, we connect to Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy, on the phone. Welcome, Dr. Go.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us online is Mark Barry, Associate Editor Emeritus at International Journal on World Peace. Great to have you, Dr. Barry.
Thank you and good evening.
So let's start with Dr. Barry. So this year, like I've said, North Korea appears to be reviving some kind of stronger public references to the Day of the Sun. Given that you've met yourself, founder Kim Il-sung, in 1994 during the first nuclear crisis with the U.S., what do you make of this renewed emphasis, and what does it suggest about the regime's current propaganda strategy regarding the Kim dynasty?
Well, coincidentally, I met Kim on this very day 31 years ago, and it was months, weeks, in fact, before he unexpectedly passed away. I was staffing a delegation of former heads of state and government, which was led by a former president of Costa Rica, a former prime minister of Egypt, and the former governor general of Canada. And we also had TV crews from CNN and Japan's NHK. And Kim definitely came across as healthy at that time, but he readily admitted that it was his son who was essentially in charge of the country. But when it came to foreign relations with the United States, with Japan, with China, with Russia, that was still his area of prerogative. And he came across truly as someone who very credibly was capable of dealing with people like Stalin, like Mao, and the non-aligned world at that time of the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, etc. So that's the root of the regime. And for Kim Jong-un, it's important to always exalt, in a sense, the root of the regime. But at the same time, my impression of Kim is that his first meetings with Trump, for example, were before the age of 40. So having achieved the age of 40, I believe, last year, I think now he can afford to look more mature, more in a leadership role. He can afford not to show up to the mausoleum on April 15th, as he has not done for the past 3 years, although he has done it on other occasions over the past several years. So it's not like he doesn't show up. So my feeling is he always has to connect to the root, but at the same time, he's trying to demonstrate that he's his own man. But I would just simply add that the people around Kim Il-sung were of extraordinary capability, who were able to deal with Stalin's people, with Mao's people, and in many ways Kim Jong-un has yet to demonstrate that his people can be both as talented and reliable and as solid as the people who surrounded his grandfather.
Right. So, well, that's a very valuable insight, especially given your personal encounter with Kim Il-sung. So it does really seem like the regime is walking a fine line between past legacy and also Kim Jong-un's personal authority now. Now, let's also bring in Dr. Go into the conversation. So the regime stresses Kim Jong-un's role in developing 주체 and other ideological frameworks. Could you explain for us how significant are these efforts in securing ideological legitimacy, and are they resonating with the current North Korean population?
Well, first of all, Kim Jong-un was too young when Juche ideology was formulated back in the 50s and 60s, and evolved further in the 70s and essentially completed this ideological development in the 1980s. So North Korea has this Juche ideology that emphasizes self-reliance and the idea that the people's will is being embodied in the figure of the Suryong, or the leader of the country, and therefore it justifies the eternal dictatorship of the Kim dynasty in North Korea. So in that sense, Kim Jong-un has inherited this ideological tradition, and this is very important because this ideology, which essentially is being repeated over and over through different ceremonies, rituals, propaganda, as well as the weekly ideological teaching seminars that everybody in North Korea have to attend, is essentially being indoctrinated into the entire North Korean society. And because people are being indoctrinated with the idea that they themselves, the North Koreans, are part of this organic body politics of the North Korean regime, which is headed by the Kims, not just Kim Jong-un, but the entire Kim family. It makes very natural for the North Korean public to accept the Kim Jong-un as their perennial leader. And this idea, I think, is a very powerful notion that allows the regime to sustain all this, essentially to face all these crises that they have to face every time that they have to engage with the outside world. When they develop nuclear weapons, there are sanctions, but then with a very strong ideological cohesion, then they can withstand the pressure that's coming from the outside, and also that the permanent economic crisis that North Korea is under. So I think in that sense, I think the ideology, in a way, is one of the most important factors that explains the survival of the regime, as well as the fact that North Korea has been able to withstand all the outside pressure they are subject to.
Right. So this ideology actually still plays into power consolidation. Let's now shift to what's happening outside of North Korea's borders. On that same day, the Day of the Sun, the U.S. flew a B-1B strategic bomber over the Korean peninsula in a joint drill with South Korea. Dr. Barry, could you explain for us what kind of message is Washington trying to send with this action?
Well, obviously, it coincided with Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary, but from time to time, B-1Bs do fly over the width of the peninsula on the South Korean side. And it's always sending a message, but the funny thing is that if you had taken a flight to Mars in October of 2024 and come back, you'd think that Biden or Harris were still president, because America's demonstrated a policy towards North Korea seems to be unchanged. The military exercises are the same, and in fact, the March exercises combined between South Korea and the U.S. targeted, in a sense, attacking North Korea, assuming the South were attacked, and even attacking underground tunnels that led to residences where Kim Jong-un might hide out. So if you turn this situation around, and if you look at the situation from Kim Jong-un's point of view, the most odious thing that the United States and South Korea do towards North Korea are not the sanctions, are not many of the other things that go on, but it's the exercises, because they are explicitly aimed at removing the regime under circumstances that the Allies agree would be warranted. So to me, that situation is unchanged, and I think President Trump is doing it simply to show that, look, this is not my first term, and in terms of my second term, we're back to square one. But hopefully, once the Ukraine war situation is somewhat settled, or at least put into more of a hibernation status, maybe you and I will get around to having discussions about reducing these allied troop exercises and discussing sanctions and literally picking up where we left off. But right now, it's as if the Biden administration had continued.
Right. So it's definitely a message, a gesture coming from the new Trump administration.
Yes.
Amid this, Dr. Barry, U.S. Forces Korea just confirmed that Washington and Seoul have signed a brand new combined war plan. It replaces the older 2015-era plan and reflects the evolution of North Korea's weapons and South Korea's military reforms. Why was this update actually necessary, and what's changed in the threat landscape over the past decade?
Well, the nuclear capability and the delivery capability has increased. But this is something that is not so much a reflection of changes of administration at the presidential level, but it reflects the discussions between the commander-in-chief of Combined Forces Command, U.S. Forces Korea, and people like Admiral Paparo, head of Indo-Pacific Command in Honolulu, in terms of what is the appropriate response and how do you move assets around, whether it's aircraft carriers, whether it's submarines, and certainly the on-the-ground response of the two countries' respective armies and air forces. So that's strictly a military planning prerogative, and but it just underscores that the readiness is always being modernized and takes everything into account. Ironically, you know, there's almost double the number of U.S. troops in Japan, but there's a lot less publicity about what sort of readiness and exercises U.S. troops undertake by themselves or with the Japanese self-defense forces. But in Korea, it's always an effort on the American part to modernize the capabilities and the planning under the presumption of worst-case scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for giving us the context of the threat landscape, the evolvement of the threat landscape. Now to Dr. Go, experts say the new plan may be more offensive than past versions, envisioning rapid retaliatory strikes if North Korea launches missiles. Do you think this creates new deterrence, or do you think it risks preemptive escalation?
Well, I think the combination of the war plans, combining the conventional as well as non-conventional aspects of the potential conflict with North Korea, I think was very much necessary. I mean, it's not just to deter North Korea, but also to reassure South Korea that the United States remains committed to its defense. Having said that, I think it's inevitable that there will be a very aggressive response component in the war plan that is about defending South Korea against North Korean threats, which, as you said, could increase the risk of preemptive escalation on the part of North Korea. The reason why this is necessary is because in the age of modern missiles that are very capable and they're very powerful, and they're so capable of evading missile defense systems that we can build with the present technology today. And then, so even the slight chance of a missile defense system not being able to intercept an oncoming missile from North Korea can be devastating, especially if the missile is headed towards Seoul metropolitan area, which is very densely populated. So in that sense, the risk is actually the downside risk way too high. So in that sense, I think given the lack of appropriate technological response to North Korea's missile capability, the best natural and logical response is to, in a way, up the ante on the against North Korea to remind them that the cost for them to attack South Korea is immense. So this is the best way to influence North Korean calculations before the conflict breaks out. So all these the escalatory measures and the strong response that's being promised by the allied forces against potential North Korean attack, these are notional. So it's a notional in order to influence North Korean calculations so that they never miscalculate in the direction of starting a conflict against the South.
Right. So, and this comes after North Korea has actually developed a lot of its technologies. Now, speaking of North Korea's technology development, there are increasing signs of deepened military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Dr. Barry, how likely is Kim Jong-un to appear at Russia's Victory Day parade? And what message would this send internationally if he stood alongside Putin and possibly Chinese leader Xi Jinping?
I know I've said on this program in previous months that that's exactly what Kim would like to do, and I really have to amend my remarks, which is the fact that he wants to go to Moscow. He wants the same prestige of doing what his father and grandfather were able to do, make trips to Moscow. But it was to do so in a bilateral way. He wants to meet with Putin. He wants to be able to be given a tour of Moscow, both the sightseeing and relevant military and scientific facilities and so forth. He doesn't want to appear on a dais watching a military parade with other foreign leaders. Least of all does he want to appear on a dais with President Xi, because President Xi will basically say to him, hey, boy, come here and bring your notepad. I have some instructions for you. So he just can't do that. Now, 10 years ago, on April 30th of 2015, he politely sent his regrets that he was not able to come and attend the military parade in 2015, that he had too many pressing matters at home. And I think that is, unfortunately for him, the most likely scenario, because the only other way he can attend the May 9th activities is to not attend the military parade, even though supposedly DPRK troops will be involved in the parade, and it would be very weird for him not to be on the dais for that. But I don't think Putin will hold bilateral meetings too early before May 9th or too soon after May 9th to accommodate Kim, although he might. And again, as your questions stressed earlier in this broadcast, the fact is that the North Korean ammunition and missiles have been indispensable. And in fact, the report issued yesterday that you noted in your newscast today between Reuters and London's Open Source Center about the indispensable role of ammunition, of which as many as 90% of the ammo provided to Russia has been given by North Korea. This has been indispensable help, and North Korea has been indispensable also in pushing back Ukrainian forces from most of the contested Kursk region of Russia. So for Kim ultimately not to show up because Putin wouldn't accommodate Kim in the way that he wants, and for Kim to be able to stay home actually raises a larger question in my mind, which is what's the future of the Russian DPRK alliance? Because no matter what's written in paper, it's the relationship between the two leaders that's going to count for the most.
Right. So we really will have to see how these the ties between the two leaders would develop. Now, speaking of which, Dr. Go, there are reports of weapons, technology exchanges, and even troop deployments to Russia. How would you evaluate this partnership between the two countries? And do you think this realignment would threaten regional or global stability in new ways?
So when at the beginning of this so-called alliance between Russia and North Korea, which was reaffirmed last year in June when Vladimir Putin, Russian president, visited North Korea to renew and update the mutual defense treaty between the two countries. There, at the moment, we believe that the alliance will be also, quote unquote, the partnership between these two countries will be essentially transactional. That essentially is icing on the cake, but then deep down, the relationship was basically a weapon sale relationship between North Korea and Russia. Then North Korea will supply weapons such as artillery shells or even missiles. In exchange, Russia would provide economic assistance in addition to some weapons technology, plus the political prestige that the Russian president can confer to a leader of a country like North Korea. But now it looks like the Russians are pretty pleased with the effectiveness of the North Korean assistance, both in terms of weapons supplied as well as the manpower. In fact, the combat troops that have been deployed on behalf of Russia in the Kursk region to fight against the Ukrainians. I believe essentially this imbues the relationship with a very dynamic character, meaning that the Russians are now probably willing to evolve this partnership even further. So if before Russians are probably they have capped the expectation on how far this partnership with North Korea could develop. Now I think Russians are more invested in this relationship. That's why they're bringing, potentially bringing Kim Jong-un to Moscow through this invitation to attend the Victory Day parade. But also I think Russians probably want to make this like a partnership with North Korea more of a permanent alliance, in the sense that the Russians and North Koreans could potentially coordinate their foreign policy as well as the security policy, so that they can have this synergistic effect that especially deters the United States, not just in Europe, but also in this part of the world, in East Asia. So in that sense, I think that is a very worrisome development. And then I think that this is something that I think our allies and partners in the United States as well and look into this matter very closely, so we can come out with we can formulate a counter strategy to ensure that these two countries don't get any closer together.
Right, so this partnership doesn't really seem to be quite temporary. Now, there had been recent footage by Russian authorities confirming North Korean laborers who are active in Russian construction projects near, and this is a clear evidence of UN sanctions violations, of course. Dr. Berry, what do you think the international community can actually do in response to this?
Well, it's not only the construction projects, but it's, in fact, there was a report out of Moscow yesterday that Russia's equivalent of Amazon.com, called Wildberries, has been hiring up to several hundred North Korean workers. And when Wildberries was asked about whether these were North Koreans, they answered indirectly that, well, we're putting them through our training program and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't want to directly answer if these were North Korean citizens. And of course, when pressed, sometimes they'll privately say, well, they're Siberian, ethnically Asian-looking Russian citizens. So they won't admit that. We used to have North Korean laborers pretty much exclusively working in the lumbering industry, and then increasingly in construction projects, some of which were well known before the sanctions reached the peak that they did. But the reality is that this is going to be part of the expansion of the relationship. But I should also note, and also in relationship to your previous question to me, when the former Defense Minister Shoigu visited Kim last month, his purpose was in many ways to reassure Kim, not only to extend an invitation to Moscow, but to reassure him, because Kim is reportedly upset about the slow or laggard payment, both whether it be in currency or in food or oil or whatever. Also upset that Russia has not affirmed that they would not allow the two North Korean soldiers captured by Ukraine to be allowed to defect to South Korea. And finally, worst of all, I think Kim is upset and probably expressed to Shoigu that he's out of the loop in terms of what Putin is discussing and Putin's office is discussing with the Trump administration about ending the Ukraine war. And frankly, from Kim's point of view, he is a co-belligerent, not just simply providing so-called mercenaries. So if I were Kim, I'd realize, I'd begin to seriously think, who the heck is my friend in this world? And if it's not going to be Trump, if it's not going to be President Xi, if it's not going to be Putin, then maybe he has to start seriously thinking that maybe Korea is better off as a united country under some sort of leadership arrangement to be able to deal with the Putins and Xis and Trumps of this new world order that's emerging. But I think Kim is really seriously thinking, what's ahead for me? What's ahead for my country? What's ahead for the Korean people on both sides of the 38th parallel?
All right. Thank you so much for your insights. We'll have to wrap up our program here. Thank you again for bringing us your opinion and your time, Dr. Go and Dr. Berry. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again.
Now, that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.